Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no-bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey guys, it's Joe Troyer from Digital Triggers and Show Me the Nuggets, and welcome to this podcast. My backyard's looking a little bare. Sorry about that. Just Hurricane Dorian and everything else happening at the moment. Haven't had a chance to put everything back. It's been a crazy week. In fact, been speaking with a ton of you followers and fans, done a ton of strategy sessions this week with people, helping people really break through, like no pitch, just all content. Today alone, either 9 or 10 consults, and it was absolutely fantastic. I know that so many people had breakthroughs in their business. But anyway, back to the point of today's podcast episode. We're doing a recap. So one of the things that I wanted to do was show me the nuggets. And one of the things I want to do just with Digital Triggers, period, is I really want to push the free line in terms of content. What's acceptable to give away in today's market? Not just trash, not just, me talking for hours with no value. That's not what I mean. Like, what are the systems and processes that we can give it away? What are the big nuggets that we can give away? And I want to really push that free line and give away more value than anybody else in the space. And I know so many of you guys have reached out and said, I've done that. I really appreciate that. I love the reviews here on the podcast and all the positive feedback. It really means the world to me. And reflecting on what's been the biggest value so far from the podcast, and I really got to say, one of the big things that I think a lot of people are missing is at the very end of each podcast episode, I ask, what's the one book that's made the biggest impact on your business? Not like in theory and in thoughts, but the one book that you can correlate to having the biggest actual impact on your business. And the books that have been shared have been great, and it's not been all of the typical and usuals. And what's great is also not only just getting the recommendation. I've been listening to a ton of them on Audible, and they've been good, but listening to the reasons why and what entrepreneurs took away from the books has been amazing, and how they've actually implemented some of the strategies and what it's done. Like, even if you don't go listen to the books, you gotta watch the rest of this episode and really just hear the big takeaways and what's made the biggest impact on all of these amazing, awesome entrepreneurs that I've had on the podcast. So you definitely don't want to miss today. And if you guys are loving this content, you guys are loving all the crazy value that we're putting out, please do me and my team a favor and leave us a review. That means that we're doing good. That helps us know that we're doing good. And if you really like any of the guests in particular, please reach out to them on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, right? Wherever they mentioned in the interview that's their place to hang out, even LinkedIn, right? And reach out to them and just thank them. Trust me, guys, at the end of the day, it makes a huge difference. And it's super, super appreciated, and it would mean the world to me. So enjoy this episode. All content, all value. Joe Troyer signing out.
Okay, I want to say it's Principles by Ray Dalio, but I haven't implemented any of that stuff. It's just cool. I thought it was all really cool. I'm going to go with the E-Myth by Gerber. Yep. What's great about that is it's really should be given to every entrepreneur very early on in their career. It's going to help people from making a lot of mistakes, but it's all just about creating standard operating procedures. And every time you do something and you decide that this is the way it's going to be done, that needs to be documented so the next person can do it for you. It's all gets those scaling principles in your head and standards principles in your head, and it's really user friendly. Highly recommend it if you haven't read it. I think it should be required reading for all entrepreneurs.
There's a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It just came out not too long ago. And it's not a business book per se. It's more of a mental kind of, I don't even know what you classify it as. But the reason why that was so important for me was because I've always been an introvert. I've always been somebody who has held myself back from doing more because of what I perceived other people thought about me. So what that book talks a lot about is just understanding that you are really kind of the biggest thing that's holding you back a lot of things. And when I say that now, it means in today's market, like doing things like I was very shy about using things like Instagram. Even now, I've only just now started posting business stuff on Instagram. And when I look back, if I could have been doing this 3 years ago, fuck, man, I missed out, And it was solely because I was worried about what my friends were going to think about me, posting business videos, and it was only going to get 20 views. That didn't have if I could go back and you can go back to my business before, I would have, like you say, you pushed all in, but like I wasn't really pushed all in. And even now, I'm like realizing that now, like when I have this extra money, like it's great because I have extra money, but like, am I really pushing all in or am I not pushing all in? Like, am I really investing in the future? Am I really like doubling down on what I believe in myself and the businesses? And that book was great. That book really does dig into really the psychology of yourself and of your own mind. And yeah, I mean, literally just like understanding that so much of this world is based on, and so much of our actions and decisions is based on what other people think, but they really don't give a shit. And neither should you, you know? And again, when it comes to like this world and what gets success right now, so much of it is social media. Like I posted something on Twitter yesterday about like, I think social media is way more powerful than SEO. Like I check social 50 times a day across my channels. It literally like shapes our world and our opinions and our views and like what we see in the world. We get it from social media. Whereas Google, like, yeah, we'll search for stuff and like maybe buy something, but like, do we though? Like you see a product on Instagram, you see it here, and then like you're going right to that website to buy it most of the time, or you're going to Amazon to buy it, you know? So obviously I still love SEO, huge market, huge place for it in business, but got off track. But yeah, that book like really helped me to understand that if I really want to be where I want to be and who I want to be, then I need to stop getting in my own way, you know? Really good book. I do recommend everyone check it out.
I can answer with a book that actually I think it changed my life and my career. And it's a quite famous book, actually. It's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. So there's a very famous takeaway from that book that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something. And overall, the book explores what makes you successful. Is it luck? Is it the time you put in? Is it hard work? Is it the environment, etc., etc.? And after reading that book, I realized that even though a lot in my life depends on luck, I actually have control over many other things, and I can put in the work, I can create necessary connections, I can change my environment, etc., etc. So I think that book like pretty life-changing for me. So if people, if anyone in your audience haven't read that, I do recommend it.
I would say if there's one, I would give the nod to The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Not sure, I'm sure you've read that book at some point. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of like, it's the best book in terms of how do you build a sales process, how do you put the different marketing strategies in place from a strategy perspective, and then from a tactical perspective, like how do you make the calls and get the appointments and do the follow-up correctly. I think it is kind of the foundation of a lot of the marketing and business development stuff we do in our business.
You know, that's a tough one because there's, you know, there's always like things out of different books that you pull together and it kind of evolves into this mesh of what your business becomes. But I would say the one that I really took to heart the most, and I read it right before I started, well, podcast memes, it was like during that time period, was Leaders Eat Last. I wanted to make sure that I created a culture of like trust and wellness and making sure that everybody kind of felt like they had a voice and they were part of a team. Because to me, what the last thing I wanted to do is create a business that wasn't thriving on the inside. Because all of that is so important to me. So to have that reiterated and to know that I wasn't nuts to be thinking that way was kind of nice. And then I'm going to piggyback on that with, it's not really a book, but it's a journal. The Living Your Best Year Ever has 100% changed my life just since starting it. I started about a year and a half ago. And if you haven't heard of it or used it, go get it and buy it for somebody else to be your accountability partner, because it will literally change the things that you can accomplish in a much shorter amount of time are pretty incredible, which has been awesome for me.
The Lean Startup, I think. The Lean Startup, it's like I read it ages ago, but it's my favorite. I think my favorite part of the book is like when he talks about like sending 100 wedding invitations. And he's like, oh, how are you going to do it? Like fold it, like fold all of them, then put all of them in the envelope, etc. He's like, yeah, what if you fold all of them and you realize they don't fit the envelope? Like you just wasted all your time. It's faster to do things small, one by one, even though it seems inefficient, until you actually understand the process properly. And then after that, automate it. So you should run everything once from A to Z before you build a process around it. And I think 99% of SEO people try to automate stuff that has never made money. And that's where they waste most of their time.
I'm going to give you a book that is probably not on your list. And it's probably not on your list because it's not a business book. But to me, the lessons are super transferable. For those who know me, I'm a bit of a space nerd. I like most things space related. There's a book by a former space shuttle commander by the name of Chris Hadfield. It's called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. And it's his story of how a Canadian became an astronaut. Bearing in mind that Canada has no space program and no astronauts previously. That was a pretty hard ask when at 5 years old you decided to become an astronaut. There is no clear path for you to follow. And yet not only did he fly space shuttle twice, he also flew the Soyuz.
Yeah.
And had incredible experiences along the way. And one of the key lessons in it, which I'll just share very briefly because I know we're short of time, Joe, is simply this. A whole generation of astronauts, when you think you get to be an astronaut, you think, that's it, I'm going to go into space. Most astronauts don't go to space. A whole generation of astronauts who grew up with a shuttle program couldn't go to space when the shuttle retired and the Soyuz, the Russian craft, took over for one reason. It was smaller. Tall astronauts could no longer fly. So imagine you've trained for 20 years and suddenly you're 3 inches too small for the new craft, or too tall for the new craft. Can you imagine how that feels? The message he brings to that is you have to learn to love the process. The outcomes themselves, your goals that you set, are really important. But if you can get your kick from the process you put yourself through every day to move forward in your business or in your personal life, that process is far more valuable than that momentary success, because that fades fast, that goes away. Enjoying the process doesn't. And so it's a brilliant book, and that's just one little snippet out there that I find personally very valuable.
It's called First Break All the Rules, What the World's Greatest Managers Do Differently. And what that really taught me was, like, I'm not a typical manager in a large organization like IBM. Like most managers in IBM are, very driven, very similar personality to yourself, like very like, right? And it really helped me understand that, like, even as an entrepreneur, like, you don't have to be like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. The whole thing is actually trying not to be like them if you're not. The whole thing is figuring out what is your key strength from a management standpoint. What are you really good at? And how do you become the best manager with that as your forte, right? That's really for me the big thing, right? So, and that's really the book I would say that makes the biggest difference. I mean, from a learning perspective, this was definitely it, but this was the book that really helped me get a good understanding that was really valuable for me.
I think the one that did have a huge impact, but is also to some degree largely like not dependent on time and events, is Anything You Want by Derek Sivers, which is funny because it is a relatively personal, like it's a summary of like all of his blog posts, and he's a brilliant guy. But the reason why I picked that is it made me realize a few things about business. One being that you can just, like, everything that we hear about how to run a business and all these books, it's just a perspective. There's no right way of doing this, and you can kind of just make up your own rules. Like, running a business is just a way of creating your own little world where it's your vision of how you want things to work. And for me, that was just like, just a relief. It was like, okay, like I don't need to subscribe to like, EOS and traction and scaling up and all these like frameworks that, sure, they're effective and they're great, but they're just a perspective. Like, you can just make this stuff up and, follow your intuition to what you think.
If I had to pick just one, I would probably have to say cash advertising. And the reason is because I've referred to that book so many times. Like, every time I reopen the Academy, I pull that book out and I do a review of what's in that book, because I want to get my mind in the right place about, obviously persuading in the right way. And then if you stack Influence, the old school book, with that, those are very, very similar books. So usually those are the two that like I'm trying to get my mindset right with. But there's so many, but those two really are, I mean, if you just had those two books, you could really do a lot in business. That's my opinion.
It's a it's technically pitched as a course, but it's just a text course. So I would call that a book. It's just text. Andre Chaperone, Autoresponder Madness. Are you familiar with him? Yeah, so our copy is very much inspired by him. The basic idea is storytelling in your email marketing. And the way he does it is incredible. The basic format is tell stories that are interesting, that are human, and keep users wanting more every single email. All of our email marketing is designed around this, and it was incredibly helpful as a book.
When I was a stock controller for a telephone company, I was seconded to a sales division, a brand new sales team, and digital telephony was new in Australia in 1993, a little bit before America actually, and they'd recruited the best salespeople from Xerox and from the other telecommunications companies. So they were like the top gun of salespeople. There was 7 or 8 of them. And they were fascinating humans. So I thought, this was interesting. I was more of an accountant, credit controller type person. And they were all using a methodology that was popular at Xerox that was taught by Neil Rackham called spin selling. And that book was their core training, and they taught on that methodology. And I couldn't help but be sort of sucked into the vortex of that idea. And along with other things, some Brian Tracy cassettes and a Tom Hopkins book, I'd have to say that spin selling was the most important book that I've read in terms of dollars made, because it gave me a methodology that I still use today, even though it's so deeply subconscious in the way that I operate. But I love it because it's customer focused. It teaches you more about investigation and problem solving rather than 57 tricky closing phrases you can say to win a customer. So I love the ethos of it. I like the research that was behind it. There's not been anything like it since, except for the Challenger method, which is the forward is written by Neil Rackham because it's fully researched. But that was a massive thing for me to read. And I took that methodology to Mercedes-Benz and just dominated with it. I was the top selling salesperson in Australia for both BMW and Mercedes-Benz. And I'd say that book was a big part of it because it was a new concept for people.